Welcome to Extra Serving, a podcast from Nation's Restaurant News. I am Sam Oches, editor-in-chief of NRN, and I am joined today by my esteemed colleagues, Joanna Fantozzi, senior editor. Joanna, welcome.
Hi.
And Alicia Kelso, executive editor. Hello, Alicia.
Hi.
Guys, we are here today to talk about one thing and one thing only, and that is arguably, I would say, the biggest news of 2024 so far. And that is that Starbucks has poached Brian Niccol from Chipotle. He was CEO of Chipotle since 2018. Starbucks has terminated immediately Laxman Narasimhan, the CEO, for the past year and a half. And Brian Niccol starts as CEO here in a couple of weeks. This is big news. Brian Niccol, of course, was CEO of Taco Bell for a few years before he went to Chipotle. Now he's on to Starbucks. Can he recreate the magic at Starbucks is the question. Joanna, let's start with you. As you are following this story, Starbucks is your beat. What do you think of this move?
Well, first of all, this is actually, I think, pretty surprising just because the whisperings that have been going around had been that they were going to try and keep Narasimhan on board with the activist investors kind of circling almost like sharks, Starboard, Elliott, and likely Starboard. Starbucks still hasn't confirmed or denied if Starboard is involved at all. The plan, allegedly, lots of allegedlys, was supposed to be that they were, at least with Elliott, trying to figure out a way to get Elliott on the executive board and keep Narasimhan still as CEO. And clearly something happened there. It seems like it was a pretty quick decision. And I think it says quite a lot that they aren't even, letting him finish out until Niccol is able to start in September. They're just completely, he's let go immediately. And I think that this really says that Starbucks doesn't want to wait much longer. They have had now 2 bad quarters, and the quarter before that was kind of iffy. And so they don't want to say, okay, what do we do? Let's try a couple of things. Let's try to improve Narasimhan's leadership. They want to just kind of cut it off at the knees and just be able to start from scratch. And it might sound kind of drastic, but look, they're one of the biggest companies in the world, and they don't want to, I guess as the expression goes, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. And so they don't want to be a cautionary tale.
Yeah, and I'd say there's probably urgency to it, too, because of all the competitors coming up, which we can get to here in a bit. Alicia, you and I have been covering this industry for about the same amount of time, about 15 years. And I don't know about you, but I can't think of executive hire that just totally caught me off guard as much as this one, or one that was just so like high profile company to high profile company. Even when Brian Niccol himself went from Taco Bell to Chipotle, that for months everybody's like, Brian Niccol should be CEO of Chipotle. Yeah. This one though was a bit of a surprise. What do you think about it?
Yeah, this is one of those announcements where you remember where you were when it happened. And, I remember the discussion, in our newsroom Slack. And I mean, my wife was at the office and I was like trying to feed my kid and get him ready. Where were you? I'm like, wait. But to have a top 10 CEO go to a top 10 company. I mean, I tried to look around, and couldn't find anything that was relatively similar other than Niccol going to Chipotle. In 2018, there are top 50 examples. There's a lot of, former Yum executives all over, Cracker Barrel now, El Pollo Loco. Kevin Hochman went from, KFC and Pizza Hut to now Brinker. But this was this sent ripples across the industry. And I think what's really interesting to Joanna's point about the activist involvement here is, when I was on the phone with Starbucks, whatever morning it was, I think it was Tuesday, they made it a point on that call and in the release to note that this was entirely board driven, which explains sort of the urgency, the short timeline, perhaps. And again, also to Joanna's point, we talked about this in our initial coverage. 2 quarters is apparently too many. Starbucks sales they're down 10%. So it's not like they were flattish to kind of down. They lost a lot of market value since the end of last year. And whereas several companies are dealing with a lot of softening from the consumer and other various macro headwinds, to your point, Sam, Starbucks has that sort of added pressure. I think we've talked about for the past year plus now, that there's a lot of sexy new competition coming in too. So it's kind of like this 1-2 punch. Consumers are more discerning, and of course they have the global footprint, which insulates you in some instances, and then kind of screws you in other instances. And when something, when a market as big as China is manifesting the way it is, from a consumer standpoint, that's gonna be a huge thing. So it's a 1-2-3 punch, basically.
For sure. And I mean, lots of opportunity here for Brian Niccol, not the least of which is $85 million. That's 85 with 9 zeros after it. I believe that's 75 million in equity and 10 million in cash. So a big opportunity to get paid for sure. But I mean, look, if somebody comes to you and says, hey, we've got the second largest food service brand, needs a new leader, you're the person to do it. You don't necessarily, you heed that call. But as I see it, there's a lot of opportunity here for Brian Niccol to turn this company around, operationally, certainly in efficiencies, and trying to remove some complexities. I think about when he first joined Chipotle, and he was constantly talking about removing friction from the experience. I never heard that experience or that term until I met Brian Niccol, and he used it over and over again. And now I use that all the time. And, he's going to remove friction from the kitchen with the complexities in the menu, from ordering, from the, throughput. All of this is going to be, I imagine, about removing friction. And hello, drive-through. I think we could expect to see a lot more Starbucks drive-throughs in the future. Joanna, what do you think the opportunity is here? What should we expect Brian Niccol to do for Starbucks?
I think that it's going to be a lot of not sexy things, I will say, because I think that what Starbucks really needs is to, and I've said this in the pieces I've written already, that they need to get back to basics. And I think that the issue is that a lot of, as you're saying, a lot of the Starbucks, especially in the kitchen, on the front lines, it's just so complicated. For baristas, especially, I mean, just this past year and a half, they've introduced boba. They've introduced, like this proprietary spicy mix for their, like when they did the spicy drinks, and they just keep complicating the menu. And I think that, that adds pressure for employees. And then on the customer side, you also have the fact that their app crashes a bunch. And they specifically in the last, I believe it was the last earnings call, that Nourishment said that they admitted that a lot of customers are going to the app, putting items in their cart, and then they see the wait time that it will take, and then they just end up abandoning their cart. And I think that they just really need that Taco Bell / Chipotle effect of getting everything to move faster. That was that, Alicia, that was that back to square one thing, that project plan that Niccol had for Chipotle. And so, yeah, I think that there's going to be a lot of, getting back to basics, uncomplicating things, because as it is, honestly, Starbucks has a lot of complicated things to worry about without adding spicy drinks and boba into the mix and olive oil. They have China, they have the unions, they have a lot of complicated things to deal with that I think operationally they really need to simplify things. And I think that Niccol probably is the guy to do it.
Yeah, that's a great point. By the way, live fact check, that's 6 zeros, not 9 zeros. He's not getting 85 billion. I was uncomfortable with it. I said it out loud, and then I'm like, I got to check that. Is that 9 zeros? It's 6 zeros. He's not getting 85 billion. He's getting 85 million. Anyway, Alicia, tell me about what you think the opportunity here is here. Do you agree with Joanna? I mean, do we think it's going to be a lot of unsexy sort of operational tweaks?
Well, I don't think they're going to get rid of olive oil, because that's Howard Schultz's pet project. He called it alchemy. But I absolutely agree. You look and I looked through Brian. I've been covering Chipotle for 15 years now. Covered Brian Niccol when he was at Taco Bell. He is a sort of a unicorn, if you will, in this industry, not only because his resume is really impressive, but because what stands out as his sort of area of expertise is threefold. He cleans up the operations. He's very focused on operations. You mentioned throughput. He's really instilled a culture of throughput at Chipotle where you could play a drinking game after every earnings call and feel pretty good, because all he talks about is throughput, and it shows in the numbers. They look at those numbers in real time at Chipotle to understand what their throughput is, and it's sort of like a real time coaching situation for his frontline leaders. That's really intriguing because it really has an impact on the bottom line, of course, on the top line, of course, and it sort of coaches the team members in real time to do better, as he's mentioned. And their retention levels are higher than they've been since he joined. The second area of expertise, unquestionably, is marketing. He's a marketer by trade, coming from Procter and Gamble, and we saw what he did at Taco Bell from a marketing standpoint. We saw what he did at Chipotle from a marketing standpoint. He made them exceptionally relevant. Now at Taco Bell, of course, he came under the tutelage of Greg Creed, who's also a giant in marketing. So I don't want to be dismissive of that, but he did take a lot of those lessons to Chipotle, to the benefit of the brand, where it's completely culturally relevant in a way that it wasn't before him. And then third, he's a digital guy. Right. Chipotle was largely insulated through the pandemic. They switched gears to mobile order ahead in the Chipotle model. And that obviously goes, hand in hand with the operations piece. And so all of these things could stand, all three of these things are things that are, I think, going to immediately help Starbucks. The one question that I have, the two questions I have outstanding about Brian Niccol, Taco Bell had a nominal international presence. So did Chipotle. So I think that's going to be a huge learning curve for him.
Yeah.
And with 85 million, I'm sure he can handle it.
He'll be okay.
And two, I'm really intrigued here. I don't think it's going to be imminent, but once the pieces maybe fall into place the way that he's comfortable, I'm really intrigued here about what if at all could be a food opportunity for Starbucks.
Oh yeah, totally.
Interesting. Go ahead, Joanna.
I love that you bring up the food opportunity, because that is something that Starbucks, now I've probably been covering Starbucks for, probably 12 years by now. And they've tried food a bunch of times. I remember when they had the first time they did happy hour, it was in like 2014, I think. And they kind of tried to make it not just drinks, but also kind of like food, snacks type of items. And that didn't really stick. They got rid of it pretty quickly. And yeah, I just feel like the food segment, the food part of Starbucks has just been kind of a little stagnant and predictable. They're always, every time they come out with new menu items and LTOs, it'll be really interesting beverages and then another cake pop. Not to be critical of Starbucks, but so yeah, I think that is an interesting opportunity for him to explore. The other kind of in piggybacking off of what you were saying, challenges he might encounter is, I don't really know what the best answer is to what to do with the question of consumer value. Because Nourishment's answer to that was to introduce the value menu. I think it's kind of too early now to see if that would have worked, since that was just 2 months ago. But a lot of analysts kind of gave the thumbs down to that, saying that Starbucks is a premium brand. They shouldn't be doing that. And yeah, how does Starbucks position itself in this kind of softening consumer environment? I think that's going to be a challenge for him as well.
You joke about cake pops, but I bet Alicia knows that the cake pop, the number of cake pops my kids have consumed, and to make your kid okay with making a swing through the Starbucks drive-thru, say, "Want a cake pop?" Oh boy, they can crush a cake pop or two. Now, it's interesting we talk about food, though, because I would say that's antithetical to the easing of operations, right? Because if you want to make things smoother, easier, simplified, adding food to the coffee space, actually, I won't be surprised if he removes food altogether I mean, a case could be made. I don't know the breakout of food sales. Alicia or Joanna, guys might know this better than I do. But, even if it's significant, if you remove the food operation and really double down on beverage, you could actually add a lot of efficiency to the Starbucks model. Now, one thing I want to explore here, though, too, that's so interesting, because if you look at Chipotle, it's not uncommon to hear people say he Taco Bellified Chipotle. Now, I am just going to posit here. Maybe you two agree with me too. I know a lot of people who have stopped eating at Chipotle because they think that the food quality went down. And everybody tells me this because they think I'm some, person that they need to unload their food information to. But I tell them, look, it's not that proof is not in the pudding. Like, the sales have gone bananas in his tenure. But I do think, and I'm not going to call their quality into question here, but I do think they brought Chipotle down to earth a little bit. You might remember before the E. coli crisis, Chipotle was very, I'll say, stuffy. I think they were kind of like, well, we're all about high quality food from, right? Like, they were all about that chefy, high quality culinary piece. And he basically said, let's just make this mainstream. Let's take this back down to earth and, make this a brand for the people, not for the, elevated, whatever consumer who wants something more than Taco Bell. So I say all that because I'm curious, and we can get into talking maybe about the competition here. Does he apply that same method to Starbucks? Does he go into Starbucks and say, Starbucks, look at their olive oil beverages, their reserve roasteries, maybe over Howard Schultz's dead body, would they be able to get rid of any of these things? But you could make the argument that Starbucks is a little bit of a stuffy brand in the coffee category, and Dutch Bros and Seven Brew are coming in and they're like, hey, we're the brand for the people. We just want you to get your coffee fast. So I'm curious what you guys think about that.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if I would necessarily call them stuffy, but I would say that they're, I don't know if out of touch, maybe. That sounds a little too harsh, but yeah, I think
elitist.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's really just, I think that Dutch Bros, Seven Brew, etc. They kind of are locked into that Gen Z demographic. And I think that Starbucks hasn't really been. I think that's what they're going to have to go. That's what they're going to go after. It's funny that you mentioned the reserve roasteries, because that could be a place where they cut corners. I mean, yeah, I think like Schultz would not be happy about that, but they cost so very much money to build. They cost so very much money to build and to run. And I could picture maybe them closing some of the roasteries to kind of simplify things.
That's probably where much of their, their reputation for being stuffy can come from too, is those roasteries. But, look, when the argument, conversation narrative switched about Chipotle's, food quality, that's simply because Chipotle was focused on scaling.
Mm-hmm.
And to maintain what they had prior to that, I think would have been, a material challenge for any brand. But Starbucks has already scaled. And so I think that calls into question then, if you want to go back to the food conversation, where is the opportunity here? Look at what is hurting Starbucks the most right now. They've lost the occasional customer. And, their rewards members are still really super loyal and really, habited into that brand. But they're getting killed on this occasional customer. And arguably it could be, because Seven Brew is everywhere in Louisville now. I stop every Friday on my way home from swim practice in the morning. It's just more convenient, like you said. And I think that has to be one of his first priorities, is getting that occasional customer. Food could be a way to do that. Again, it does complicate the operations, but then when you look, they also have to start differentiating themselves as more competition comes into the mix. Mm-hmm. The only brand I can think of in that sort of startup class that is pressuring in a competitive way that offers food is Scooters. Seven Brew has muffin tops; they're prepackaged. And I think that's pretty much how it goes across the board with those brands. So it could be an interesting way to differentiate and perhaps win back a lot of the occasional customers that Starbucks has won. But who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Joanna?
it is.
Sure.
That is really interesting. So it almost seems non-intuitive to me, because to me, I would think that with all of these interesting, weird LTOs, some of them work, some of them don't. I personally didn't like the spicy drinks, but some of I thought that the boba drinks were good. I would think that would appeal to the occasional customer, because if you're like, I don't need to come into maybe you're like, I don't need to come into Starbucks for my morning coffee, but I do think that LTO sounds really interesting. And so maybe I'll go to Starbucks whenever they come out with a new interesting drink, or I'll get maybe you're the type of person that's like, I get my pumpkin spice latte one time a year, because I know a lot of people that do that. They're like, I'll do it once. And so you would think then that those LTOs would appeal to people. So I think that the issue is there is no easy fix, and I think he's going to have to balance operational innovation with operational efficiency.
Can I ask a follow up on that?
Yep.
Because this is probably well suited for Joanna, who has a really strong pulse on this brand in particular. I don't consider Starbucks to be this marketing powerhouse. They have this lavender drink and this spicy drink and this boba like drink. I think they call it pearls or something. I don't know.
Pearls. Yes. They don't like the term boba.
I don't hear anything about this unless I'm at the Starbucks or within proximity of a Starbucks. And it kind of goes back to that conversation that we had earlier about the strong points of what Niccol brings to the table. And his marketing prowess, his pedigree. And I think perhaps that could be the biggest opportunity, because especially when we have these conversations, which we do a lot within our editorial team, who are the strongest marketers in this industry? Marketing in this industry is critical, especially now with more competition, especially now with traffic erosion, especially now with, discerning customers. We don't consider Starbucks in that marketing conversation. That might be a terrible thing to say. It's not top of mind.
Yeah. I agree.
They're pushing me stuff. I've got the app. They're giving me push notifications. I just don't. Otherwise, they're not in the conversation of that ethos.
Haven't needed to be, right? I mean, couldn't you suggest Starbucks has owned this industry? Its main competitor has been Dunkin'. And Dunkin' is fundamentally different, I would suggest. Maybe not so different, but it's, Dunkin' has a different sort of type and style of coffee, so that, usually you're team Dunkin' or team Starbucks. And it's also it's not primarily food, because most of its sales are coffee. But I guess I would put them in two different categories, Dunkin' and Starbucks. When it comes to just like coffee and, that occasional customer you're talking about, Alicia, I would argue that Starbucks has basically owned the category to itself and not had the pressure to market. And so it's like, when we look at all these things, the digital ordering and operations, a lot of the drive-throughs, a lot of these things that Brian Niccol brought with him to Chipotle, Starbucks is good. They've already got that. I would suggest, and I think this is kind of talking about what you're saying, Alicia, maybe marketing and making Starbucks cool again, or just, again, bringing it back down to earth again. Maybe that's the unlock here to get Starbucks back to really owning category like it had before.
Do you remember the last time they were leaders in digital marketing? Because I do. And I know the year.
Let's hear it.
I hope I'm right on the year. Now I don't want to put it on the record. 2017. Right on this year, because that was the Unicorn Frappuccino year.
Unicorn
Gosh, was it that long ago?
I think it was 2017. It's either 2016 or 2017, because I know that I covered it the last publication I was at. And wow. I remember that it was hard because we wanted to write about it, and they kept selling out, and you had to go back. We went to multiple Starbucks stores. And so what I think is really interesting is that in kind of like the peak of, I need to share everything I eat and drink on Instagram, they were there with, it was the Unicorn Frappuccino, the Mermaid Frappuccino. They came up with a series of these for like a good year and a half, and they were all really, really popular. And now I think that digital marketing has shifted, and it hasn't just become about, look at this like really colorful thing that I really need to share on my Instagram. or Facebook. And now I feel like it's a little bit different. And now what people really need when it comes to digital marketing in order to stand out from the fray is that Starbucks needs to have a voice. They don't, I feel like Taco Bell, Chipotle, a bunch of other brands are just really good at kind of honing that, that kind of fun, engaging social media digital marketing voice, and Starbucks doesn't have that. And so I think that they need to kind of ramp up and remodernize and get out of the 2017 post 2017 lull that they've been in.
Let me piggyback real quick off that with what you say is really interesting, and it does go back to, it goes beyond digital marketing into sort of the culture. Like you walk into a Starbucks and it's pretty quiet. You know, there's a joke that baristas are going to spell your name wrong, whatever. I'm not, I swear I'm not getting paid by Seven Brew. There just happens to be one on my way home every Friday. Every time I pull in there, the music is playing, sometimes too loud for my age, but it's playing. The people are outside. They're like, how are you? What are your plans the rest of this day? What are your plans this weekend? Because I always stop by on Friday. They're engaging me in a way. They're looking at me. It is trained. And they have free t-shirt giveaways sometimes. You know, they've got this program where I buy a drink every Friday, and like every fifth or sixth Friday, I get a free drink. It's just a different feel that has habited me toward that. Not only is it convenient because it's a drive-through on my way home. That's critical. But it also feels kind of fun when I go there because I'm like singing along with them. I'm talking about myself, which people like to do. Coincidentally, I'm going to work. What are your plans? You know what I mean? It goes back to that stuffy thing. But Joanna, you talked about the digital marketing piece. That extends into the in-store local marketing piece. It extends to culture. We could have a whole other conversation about what Brian Niccol has done from a culture standpoint as it applies to Chipotle. They have industry leading benefits as well. They haven't been immune to some of this unionization talk, but you can't argue with the list of benefits they offer, the retention, all that stuff. I mean, I think this is the first, I think, of many conversations that we're going to be having about this.
Mm-hmm.
That is very true. And on that note, I will tell our audience, be sure to subscribe to Extra Serving. Wherever you listen to podcasts, follow along at nrn.com. Follow Joanna, follow Alicia, because they are on top of this story. And to Alicia's point, we will have many more updates to come. Joanna, Alicia, thanks, guys, for taking some time to chat today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
See you guys.